All right. I want to take a look at the Wardells now. The Wardells. The Wardells are the reason I know that I come from an old American family is that my grandmother and my great aunt Marie, told me all the stories. Some of them not traces, not actually verifiable, of the Wardell history in Monmouth and Ocean County, New Jersey, and a lot of it is true or sort of true, and it is an old story. And for a long time, I thought that was as historical as I could be. Then I wasn't a Washington or a Lincoln, but I was a Wardell, and we had been here a long time. And then in tracing the Burges, I found I was also a descendant of Sarah Morris, and the few knights in the Wardells and the Applegates and the Tiltons pale in compared to the heritage you get through Sarah Morris. But for a long time growing up, I was proudest of all of these families of being a Wardell, and I had been indoctrinated in that by my grandmother, Catherine Wardell Applegate. I'm Gary Applegate. My wife is Joanne Zabranik. My daughter is Katie Applegate. My father was William C. Applegate. His mother was Catherine Wardell. She was born in 1896. She died in 1891. She lived next door. Her and her husband, Ding, built the house I grew up in. When my father and I, and my mother and the family moved back from Florida, where he was an instructor in the Air Force at Bartow Air Force Base. When we came back to Lakewood, we moved into the house next door to my grandmother that her and Ding had built, and eventually we remodeled it into the house that we're trying to sell right now. Catherine's father was Thomas Tilton Wardell. Thomas, like Rufus, worked for the railroad. He lost his arm in a railroad accident, as I believe Rufus did too. Thomas Wardell's father, Thomas, was born in 1868, just after the Civil War. He died in 1926. The Wardells were from Laurelton, where they weren't. They were actually from Wardell's Neck, Princeton Avenue, in Burketown. Wardell's Neck is the very end of Princeton Avenue that goes out into the bay. That's where the original Wardells settled in Burketown, and the farm that Thomas lived in Laurelton is directly across from where Brick Hospital is now. The building was still there until recently. I haven't gone by in the last few years to take a look if it was still there, but it was still there 10, 20 years ago. The farm was still there, backed up on Forge Pond there. Thomas Tilton Wardell, Catherine's brothers, Thomas Tilton's son, fought in World War One. They were my great uncles. I called them uncle, but they were my great uncles. Thomas's father was Charles Wardell. Charles Wardell was a sergeant in the cavalry during the Civil War. He was the sheriff of Ocean County for a long time afterwards. He's my great-great-grandfather. He was also surrogate for the county for many, many years. Charles Wardell was married to Catherine Tilton. I want to go back and just... Catherine Wardell's mother was Lulu Hoffmeyer, son of a German sea captain, daughter of a German sea captain, sorry, child of a German sea captain. Lulu was from Tom's River. The Wardells were from Bricktown, Laurelton, Wardell's Neck. Charles had been a county surrogate and a county sheriff and a sergeant in the Union Army. He was married to Catherine Tilton. Catherine Tilton is from Cedar Bridge. Now, it's not Cedar Bridge down in by Manahawk. It's Cedar Bridge was a neighborhood in Bricktown, and that's where she's from. A lot of people get that wrong because they think that they're talking. It's where Cedar Bridge Road leads to, and from past Lakewood Airport going out to Brick. I'll talk about the Tiltons when I get to the Tiltons, a few chapters further on. Tiltons go back a long, long way. They were minor nobility like the Wardells and the Applegates. And they go back to pre-Columbian times. John Tilton, the oldest one I have, was born in 1400. But that's Catherine Tilton. That's my grandmother's grandmother. She was named after her, Catherine Ann Tilton. Okay. Charles Wardell was a son of Samuel Wardell and Rachel Twining. The Twinings are an interesting family because there's a book I'm going to show you. It's called Twining Family. And this book is, 1905, this copy, it's the second printing. This copy is from 1905. So it makes it, 100 and some year old book. And it traces the Twining family in America from the first Twining that married a widow of a Mayflower, lander. So it goes back to 1620, 16 in New England, Massachusetts in 1620, 1630. And Samuel married a Twining, and the Twining family is a very interesting family because Nathaniel Twining was a chief of staff of he's my grandmother's third cousin, so my third cousin twice removed, chief of staff of the armed forces under Eisenhower, and he commanded the unit that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So don't mess with the Twinings. But Samuel was married to Rachel Twining. Samuel's father was John Wardell. His mother was Hannah Herbert. And this is just one branch of the Herbert family that Stanley always tortures me about, but he supposedly, when he tells me which Herbert he is, I'll be able to connect him to one of the Herberts that I am. There's also Herberts down here, I think. Yeah, Herberts and Herberts. So, and there's Herberts here too, under the iron. So the Herberts are an old Herbertsville. They're an old Monmouth, Ocean County family, and Ocean County was part of Monmouth County for a long time. That's why I say Monmouth Ocean. It's mainly Ocean, but at one time Ocean was Monmouth. And So Charles fought in the Civil War. His father was Samuel. Samuel's father was John. John's father was Eliakim Wardell. That's the second Eliakim Wardell. It's not the original. That's not the pioneer. And it's fairly certain that this Eliakim is the one who married the second Lenni Lenape in the family tree. Her name was Blueskin, although a lot of Wardells put her name down as Bluebird, which is a much more poetic name. But I'm almost certain from oral tradition that her name was Blueskin. And there was a famous pirate out of Delaware that was named Blueskin. So it's not an absurd name as it sounds. It was a documented kind of, for some reason they called people Blueskin in those days. Eliakim's father was Samuel. Eliakim, by the way, fought in the American Revolution. Eliakim's father was Samuel. Married Sarah Arney. These two are the Irons in the Irons family. You'll see that we also come across these two again. So I'm several branches of the family of my family tree descend through Samuel Wardell and Sarah Arney. Sarah Arney, one of my favorite places in New Jersey when I used to be on the road traveling was Arney's Mount down in Jobstown on the way to Mount Holly. There's this Mount Laurel, Mount Holly, sand mountains down there, and Arney's Mount. They're all, maybe 150 feet high. That you get a great view with a flat South Jersey countryside from them. And it's named Arney's Mount after Sarah Arney's family, an old family too. Samuel's father was Joseph Wardell, born in 1660. He actually grew up he was born in New Hampshire, but he came to Monmouth with Eliakim. Eliakim, his father was Eliakim Wardell, his mother was Lydia Perkins. These people are both semi-martyrs in the Quaker Church because they were tortured by the Puritans in New England, in Massachusetts, when they were Quakers. And as Quakers, they didn't actually follow the rules that the Puritans liked, and eventually, when they escaped essentially to Long Island and Gravesend, and then eventually, when New Jersey was opened, they came to New Jersey to be closer to William Penn's Quaker Paradise in Philadelphia, but they settled in Shrewsbury in Monmouth County. Lydia had been whipped and put in the stocks by the Puritans. Eliakim had many political arguments with the leaders of the Puritan community. In fact, one of the reasons why his brother, Samuel Wardell, may have been executed during the Salem witch trials in 1692 was because how angry they were with Eliakim. Eliakim had some of the people that were on the committee that hung people had openly feud. Eliakim had actually accused their wives of being whores and things. The first Wardell in America was Thomas. He had 3 sons: Benjamin, who not much is known about; Samuel, who was hung as a witch at the Salem witch trials; and Eliakim, who became a Quaker martyr and is often called the pioneer in old Monmouth County, Jersey histories, because he's one of the very first men to settle in New Jersey, not white men anyway. The Applegate legend about Eliakim was that one of the Eliakims, fought a war with the Lenape Indians, and The Indians hung all his brothers, but he ended up marrying a Lenape princess. Now, Eliakim's brother was hung. His brother was hung as a witch by the Puritans, not by the Indians. And the second Eliakim, he actually lived during the Indian rebellions of the 1760s. So it may be a combination of those stories. Although he may have had brothers who died fighting the Indians, he may have actually had. My grandmother told me that they fought a war, a little family war over on Princeton Avenue in Wardell's Neck, and he lost. And the only way he got out of it was he married Blueskin. That sounds a little John Smithish, a little Jamestownish, but one of them's brother was hung, but not by Indians. Thomas Wardell, the first one in America, he probably wasn't a Quaker, though he may converted. There's some evidence that he converted after Eliakim became a staunch Quaker. Thomas's father was John Wardell. He never left England. His father was Hugh Wardell, 1530, 1585. His father was also Hugh Wardell, 1490, 1541. His father was Hugh Wardell. His father was Sir John Wardell. (1462). And that's as far back as I take the Wardells. They may have been kinsmen, some kind of family or men at arms for the De La Warrs, the West's family, which was the Delaware, became Lord Delaware. Wardell and De La Warr do sort of have some kind of combination. Okay, that's the Wardells. Now, interesting thing about the Wardells. Let's try and do a couple of things here. Not going to do the Twinings. Notice in the Herbert, notice Free Love Woolley. What a great name from 1721, huh? Okay, if we go to the Burges again, and we look at Joseph Burge, Jonathan Burge, Joseph Burge, Zelpha Ann Gifford. Notice Zelpha Ann Gifford. Her father was Ananiah Gifford, whose great-grandfather was Ananiah Gifford, whose wife was Elizabeth Wardell, the daughter of Eliakim. Okay? So my mother, once again, through the Giffords, is related to my father through Lydia Perkins and Eliakim Wardell. They're again 9th or 10th cousins. In fact, there's a third Wardell that we'll find in another family. Elizabeth Margaret, I think her name was, and Samuel. All three are my great-grandparents. All three are my great-great-uncles as well. They are all my 8 generations back, 6 great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-great-great-great-grand aunts or uncles. That's why lines start to disappear, because for instance, when you get to Eliakim, 3 or 4 family lines disappear because they all come to Eliakim. Only one. I didn't continue on with all of them because they're redundant from then on. Okay. Wardells from minor nobility. You see, some of these guys were knights. Okay. Like the Applegates and like the Tiltons. That's the Wardells.